Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, January 4th, in the year that we're told, 2024. And it's another installment of, well, it's the third so far, of just like, probably a three-part series. I don't know if I'm going to do another one after this about the prophets. I'm calling nice prophet because I think we've got the wrong idea in mind, maybe. I don't know. Hey, you know what? Even if you still believe the New Testament and you think John the Baptist was the greatest of prophets, look how abrasive he was. My goodness. Scribes and the Pharisees come out, see what's going on. Maybe they got the idea in their head. Hey, maybe I'll go and get me some of that good repentance. Maybe I'll get me some of that good baptizing. If they were repentant, what's the problem? And what does he do? Calls them children of vipers. Man, it's not loving. It's not love. It's not all inclusive. It's certainly not accepting. So I'm publishing this one free to all because I'm starting out with just an advertisement for my book. So I published the book about a week ago on Amazon, and I got a 90-day Kindle Select thing. So if you're in Kindle Unlimited, you can read it. You don't have to buy it. If not, you can buy it. I'm cool with that. I got it on Kindle in paperback right now. 30 for the Kindle, 40 for the paperback. It finishes out at 191 pages. That's a 7x10. That's not, your typical smaller sizes. Like most of the books that I have are 6x9 or smaller. Would have finished out a lot more pages had it been 6x9. I made it 7x10 so that I could put all of the maps that I designed in there, all those maps and graphics, which sometimes have to have a lot of small locations, little dots and names, so that they were pretty easy to read. Because I tried it as I was writing this book, and it wasn't working out so great, so I had to go back and redo all of those maps myself, for about 45 of them. About 45 of them. And a whole lot of text in there, too. So, please help support the Obry Project and all of the work that I do by picking up a copy of the Bible versus the Middle East. I don't have a hardcover yet. I'll have a hardcover pretty soon, maybe a couple weeks. But, yeah, it sure would help a ton. And not just for me and for the profit that I make, which isn't a ton through Amazon. It's, I would say, okay. I would say okay. If a third of the profit is okay, then it's okay. That's on the Kindle. The softcover, they're not as bad, but they can be a little rough on taking those profits. So, I guess that's about it. I have added a Telegram group. So I'll try to remember to put the link in the description of that, the Telegram group. And I did rejoin Twitter. And I'm not, I don't, okay, fine. You know what? I don't really understand these groups very well. Like, I get on them, and I try to follow things that are that I am interested in, which is almost nothing. That's the thing, it's almost nothing. Almost nothing interests me. I don't think much of anything out there is interesting. You guys think stuff out there is interesting? I mean, I'm just wondering, because I've gotten to the point where I can't even watch anything that's produced anywhere on social media. It either makes me so mad because they're not including a lot of things, or they're not talking about stuff that I think is really important. So it's like irritating, But I will definitely try to include those links And if you're not a member, please become a member. I got all of the old stuff. And actually, here's one thing. I'm going to add this. This is important. So, when I set up the member thing, I chose the $14.99 because I thought that was fair, and I still do. I still think it's fair, and the reason I think it's fair is, one, nobody is treating the material that I am, and not in the way I am, and not as in depth as I am. If you know somebody else, and don't put UBTV in the comments, not that I'll delete it or anything, but that's not the same thing. That is so far from the same thing. So I'm like, this is extremely unique. It's very useful. And of course, anybody who's familiar with my content, they know that it's not just geography like the book. And the book doesn't just treat geography. It actually treats the language too, to show you how they hide the real geography of the real Canaan, the real promised land, behind the language. How they use the Mizora and how they mix up terms to hide it. That's in there too. So there's a lot of things that I deal with. Our history, as in our real history. The language, as in what's that language tucked underneath the Mizora that they're hiding with the Mizora. Geography, and other topics like this topic. We're going to go into the prophets. And last time, I spent a little time on Elijah at the end, and then I had a bit of a rant there for a while. You can find that on my Patreon or by becoming a member. Oh, so I am gonna add a new tier to YouTube, a new tier, because I think a lower price is more fair, and I'd like to get more people on board. So look for that. I think if I add that new tier and I can get rid of that old tier, it's much more easy to afford. The thing is, I've got to do just about everything manually. Literally, I got to carve out a day to do all of that manually. And they don't make it very easy on you. So it would be good if I could just, tell you what, join the Patreon instead. If you joined at the $25 level, you would get all of those videos. And I'm hoping to add more that's in the backlog on YouTube as I go. And you'll also get those audios. At the $25 level, you get an audio every single week. Every other week, it's right now, the rise and fall of the great powers with commentary. And every other week, it's Let's Consider the Book of Matthew. So you get all that. All right. So there's all my advertising. We'll go right on to the prophets. We're going to start right there at 1 Kings chapter 22. It's good to read most of the chapter, really honestly, and this is easily one of my favorites because it demonstrates with such a clarity how the prophets did not have to be nice, for one thing, and more than that. It demonstrates how the prophets were sometimes assholes. And not only that, and not because there's different kind. You can say if somebody's just selfish, they're just an asshole. There's that. They're cranky, they're mean for no reason to everybody because they're just thinking about themselves. That's one. But then there's the other, who is, well, I'm not going to spare the feelings of this person, like in this case, a king, who has the power to influence so many lives and hurt or end so many lives. So I'm not going to be nice to him because he is an awful person. He's actually the same king that we ended up last time on regarding Elijah. This is King Ahab, or Ahab. And he's one of the most predominant kings as far as how much story we get on him of the house of Israel, by far. We get a lot of content on Ahab and his wife Izbol or Jezebel. Possibly because he might have been one of the most rich and powerful kings that the house of Israel had in its whole run. And there's detail about him. And between him and that old lady of his, Jezebel, it seems like they did a whole lot of damage as far as continuing to lead the house of Israel down that same road as their first king, Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. So what's going on here? So the king of Judah, which is Jehoshaphat at this time, he's kind of sort of buddies with the king of Israel, which is Ahab at the time. And Ahab's been having trouble with Aram. Now, I'm not going to call it Syria like these English Bible translators do. I'm calling it what it is. It's Aram. It's literally spelled A-R-M, like arm. And if you said like the people of or something of Aram, it would look like army. I'm serious. It's spelled exactly the same. A-R-M-Y, army. So the nation was Aram, and they had not only disputes over some of the territories within the tribes of like half Manasseh, Gad, Reuben, which were Ma'ober e Yarden, it's described, and then the English will say like over Jordan. But also on their chief city, which is Shomrun, but they call it Samaria. So he comes up to him, and we'll start kind of right there with verse 2. And it came to pass in the 3rd year that Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. Came down. It's interesting. He says came down. They're supposed to be in the north. I'm sure it's the word Irad, which we'll get to in later episodes of the Obery Hours. And the king of Israel said unto his servants, Know you that Ramoth and Gilead is ours, and we be still, and take it not out of the hand of the king of Aram? And he said unto Jehoshaphat, Wilt thou go with me to battle to Ramoth Gilead? And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, I am as thou art, my people as thy people, my horses as thy horses. So you see what these kings are doing? Go up against that king for what? To get back this land? Well, have you taken a step back and thought whether or not you deserve to hold the land? Remember why the land was given to Israel in the first place. It was entirely conditional upon their lawful behavior. The land was entirely conditional on their lawful behavior. So Israel lost land all the time because they tended to never behave very lawfully whatsoever. But it's not setting these kings back because they're now committing the lives of men who stand to gain little in comparison to them, as they were collecting taxes from all of these territories of theirs that they wanted to continue to control. So there's the problem. Therein is the problem. They are the problem because they are thinking about them, their reign, their reputation, their wealth and riches, their comforts. They aren't thinking of any of the people, and I'm not just talking about the people's like well-being, their lives and their wealth, but that's a thing. But they're not thinking, of course, they're not thinking of the root cause of why these things are coming to pass. And Jehoshaphat said unto the king of Israel, Inquire, I pray thee, at the word of Yahweh today. And the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, the same word, prophets, Nabiah, about 400 men, and said unto them, Shall I go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall I forbear? And they said, Go up, for Yahweh shall deliver it into the hand of the king. And Jehoshaphat said, is there not here a prophet of Yahweh besides that we might inquire of him? So I guess he was a little concerned that all of these prophets were basically yes men to King Ahab. And I think Jehoshaphat might have wanted to be a little more sure. He might have wanted to have a second opinion, even though all of these prophets could have been a lot of them. He was a bit concerned. And the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, There's yet one man, Micaiah, the son of Imlah, by whom we may inquire of Yahweh, but I hate him. For he doth not prophesy good concerning me, but evil. And Jehoshaphat said, Let not the king say so. Then the king of Israel called an officer. What he's telling him is, I beg to differ, sir. Maybe we should hear from him. Then the king of Israel called an officer and said, Hasten hither Micah, the son of Imlah. And the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, sat each on his throne, having put on their robes, in a void place in the entrance of the gate of Shomron, not Samaria, and all the prophets prophesied before them. So they're obviously all there. All the yes men are there. And they're sitting and they're waiting. And they're going to get Micaiah. And I don't know how long this was, because, these things didn't happen instantaneously. But maybe they went to get Micaiah. Now think about this for a second. Maybe this all did transpire very quickly, because Micaiah was already in Ahab's prison. Think about that. Remember last time how I said those prophets, they always took their lives and their freedom in their hands, especially when they talked to kings. So maybe Micaiah was at hand because he was already in Ahab's prison. And it says, Then Zedekiah, the son of Chananah, made him horns of iron. And he said, Thus says Yahweh, With these shalt thou push the Arami until thou have consumed them. So I guess it must have been a minute, right? I mean, unless he had some bendable iron laying around. And all the prophets prophesied so, saying, Go up to Ramoth Gilead and prosper, for Yahweh shall deliver it into the king's hand. And the messenger that was gone to call Micaiah spake unto him, saying, Behold now, the words of the prophets declare good unto the king with one mouth. Let thy word, I pray thee, be like the word of one of them, and speak that which is good. So whoever this messenger is, wherever Micaiah was, is telling him not to go tell the truth. He's telling him, go and tell them what they want to hear. Now, this is the same thing. There was a messenger sent to Elijah also, because everybody was looking for Elijah. He was a fugitive. He was like the public enemy number one, for real, politically, quote unquote lawfully. Elijah at one time, for a long time, was public enemy number one in Ahab and Jezebel's kingdom, the house of Israel. And they sent a guy. Well, he was out he's looking, and he found Elijah, and Elijah said, I know Ahab's looking for me. Well, of course, he knew. He said, you can tell him I'm here in this place. They didn't name the place. And he told him, he said, look, you want me to go and tell him I found you, but if you're not here, and this was a high-ranking official, by the way, in Ahab's kingdom, he said, if you're not here, and he comes to look for you, and I told him you were here, and you're not, he's gonna kill me. You really, really need to be straight with me. You need to be here if I go tell him. So I got a feeling that all the officials that worked for Ahab at this time were quite afraid of him and Jezebel. And it was probably, it might have been one of the heights of the house of Israel. But I got a feeling working in that environment, working for the administration, which he would have had quite a large administration, was probably a very stressful job. Please don't imagine guys running around in potato sacks with sandals on. That would be impossible. This was quite an administration. And I got a feeling that most of the people who worked for it were under a lot of stress. If we understand that, as opposed to these being bass-ackwards, damn near cavemen, I think it helps to add a sense of just how stressful these moments of truth where a prophet would have to say things to them that nobody around wanted to say to them. Because at any given time, about any sitting king, whether it be Judah or Israel, any other kingdom, though they may at another time pay for their actions if they acted impetuously, could have probably anyone who came before them killed. Like that. And especially if we're talking about a kingdom full of unrighteous people. How and what? Not from the people. They would not see retribution from the people. And a lot of these kings had very little fear of seeing retribution from Yahweh, obviously, based on the way they behaved. So Micah answers him, and Micah said, as Yahweh lives, what Yahweh says to me, that will I speak. He was drawing his own line in the sand. I'm going to say what he says to me. Because Micaiah, like any decent prophet, was far more afraid of Yahweh than a powerful king or two powerful kings. So he came to the king. The king said unto him, Micaiah, shall we go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall we forbear? And he answered him, and pay attention. And he answered him, go and prosper, for Yahweh shall deliver it into the hand of the king. Now pay attention to the king's response in verse 16. And the king said to him, how many times shall I adjure thee that you tell me nothing but that which is true in the name of Yahweh? That's telling. It's telling. Why is it telling? It tells us a few things. One thing it tells us, like I said in the last episode, that Ahab, unlike a king who might have been remarkably wicked, Ahab was a king who strikes most attentive readers as a king that was torn. Sort of torn between his desires and torn between maybe wanting to do the right thing, or torn between his desires and torn between his fear of the God of Israel, who he knew lived and saw him. So it's really funny that when this Micaiah, who he already said, this guy never tells me what I want to hear. And we're talking about him going up into a battle where he may die, the king, because apparently back then the kings actually fought too, or were at least present too. along with the soldiers. So things could go wrong for them. Things could go wrong. And when Micaiah comes and he tells him, Go up, O king, and prosper," Ahab knew immediately. He knew immediately that he was not being sincere. He wasn't telling him the truth. Which is weird, is it not weird? 3 verses earlier, Micaiah said to the man who came to get him, "As Yahweh lives, what Yahweh says unto me, that I will speak." And then a few verses later, what does he tell him? He tells him, "Go up, O king, and prosper." And furthermore, he says, "Yahweh shall deliver it into your hand." And Ahab knows immediately Micaiah is lying to him. But the thing is, Micaiah was saying to him exactly what Yahweh told him to say to him. That's correct. So now after Ahab immediately knows that he's telling him, basically he's telling him sort of a lie, and he's encouraging to go up, like, well, you know, you're taking your life in your own hands, I suppose, if you go. But then he continues. It says, and he said, "I saw all Israel." This is Micaiah speaking now, in response to him saying, "Don't lie, tell me the truth." He says, "I saw all Israel scattered upon the hills, as sheep that have not a shepherd. And Yahweh said, These have no master. Let them return every man to his house in peace." And the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, "Did I not tell you that he would prophesy no good concerning me, but evil?" And he said, "Hear thou therefore the word of Yahweh." This is Micah again. Let me scroll up. "I saw Yahweh sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left. And Yahweh said, Who shall persuade Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said on this manner, and another said on that manner. And then there came forth a spirit, and he stood before Yahweh, and he said, I will persuade him. And Yahweh said unto him, Wherewith? And he said, I will go forth, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, Thou shalt persuade him, and prevail also. Go forth, and do so. Now, was that really a vision that he saw? If so, was it a vision of something that really happened? And he's relaying something that really happened. Now, I'm not asking that question because I'm saying it didn't. That's not why I'm doing that. I'm just inserting this as questions. And he continues, Now therefore, behold, Yahweh has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these prophets, and Yahweh has spoken evil concerning you. But Zedekiah, the son of Chenaanah, remember he made the iron horns. He was the leader of all the prophets, saying, You're going to do great. You're going to go and do great. Zedekiah, the son of Chenaanah, went near, and he smote Micaiah on the cheek and said, which way went the Spirit of Yahweh from me to speak unto thee? And Micaiah said, Behold, thou shalt see in that day, when you shall go into an inner chamber to hide thyself. And though it's difficult to understand exactly what's being said there, I think what's being said there is you'll realize who and what you are and your mistake in a day of trouble when it's too late. And maybe that day was very close at hand. And the king of Israel said, Take Micaiah and carry him back unto Amon, the governor of the city, and Joash, the king's son, and say, Thus saith the king, Put him in prison, and feed him with bread of affliction, and with the water of affliction, until I come in peace, until I come back. And I'm assuming the bread and the water of affliction means very little, like they do in most county jails in America today, to this day. Now it's interesting, he said, carry him back to Amon, the governor of the city, and to Joash, the king's son. Carry him back. Why was he with them? Don't know. And Micaiah said, If you return at all in peace, then Yahweh has not spoken by me. And he said, Hearken, O people, every one of you. So he's calling everyone, probably because he was going, well, he knew he was going to be taken and thrown into prison and treated very badly and probably starved. Pretty badly. Like in today's county jails in America, where they feed grown men 1,200 calories a day. Grown men. That's what they feed them. That's here in America. Right here. So he says to everyone, he's calling everyone to be a witness. In part because I'm probably hoping that when all this comes to pass that he had prophesied against Ahab, somebody will let him out. They'll come to their senses and they'll say, This is a prophet of Yahweh we had here. Let's let him out. Let's let him out, lest worse things happen to our nation or something bad happens to us who've witnessed this. So that's how a prophet, a real prophet, speaks to a very powerful, very feared, not one king, two. I know he was speaking directly to Ahab, but remember the king of Judah was there too. Can you think about that? Just try to get that in your head. And here's the thing, because I think this helps a bit. I've had to go up in front of not only many judges at various times, and it can be intimidating. They wear those sleek black robes and they sit far above you, and you are attentive, because if you are not, they have armed policemen in the courtroom to see to it that you're attentive. Whether you're in there in shackles, or whether you walk in there in plain clothes and are a bit concerned you might leave in shackles. It's nerve-wracking. Anyone who hasn't done it, it's nerve-wracking. For any of you who haven't spent any time in the criminal and justice system, you know that even if you have to go to court for something, anything, all of you know how nerve-wracking. That's nerve-wracking. I've had to, in times that I was in and out of jails, I was brought before the warden. lieutenants, other men of power. It can be nerve-wracking. It can be nerve-wracking. And I've also been brought before other kinds of councils which didn't have as much power to inflict as much damage upon me as those powers of the injustice system did. It's all nerve-wracking, though. Very, very much so. Even if you're in the... Well, maybe especially when you're in the right. And we're not talking about, like, John's problems from the past, which I'm sure I was rarely in the right. Sort of, kind of. Sort of, kind of. Because things get really gray back then, because there was a number of times that I wasn't breaking the law. I wasn't actually doing anything lawless. We are talking about manslaw here. But imagine someone far more powerful. And it says they're up on their thrones. They're sitting far above him, very powerful. They've got all their yes men around them. They could kill him in a moment. Just give the word. And he goes up, and not only does he bald-faced lie to him, knowing, and here's the thing, Micaiah knew good and well that Ahab would sniff him out. And he knew that when he told him that in the first place, go up and prosper, O king. And he might have said it quite snidely, maybe subtly and snidely. He knew Ahab would know that he was lying to him. He knew his entire approach was going to put Ahab off a lot. A lot. And he already knew that Ahab didn't like him. And he already knew, now keep this in mind, when that one guy, I think his name was Obadiah, one of the king's servants, who had been hiding a number of prophets, by the way, because Ahab and Jezebel, they're hunting them down. They're enemies of this state. Prophets of Yahweh. That Obadiah was in the administration of Ahab, and he was scared to death of him, and he was hiding these other prophets. The tension for this guy, Micaiah, would have been tremendous. And yet he still goes in and acts like to the king, though I'm sure he was smart enough to choose how his words were said, but like an asshole. He lies to him in a very snide way, and I just would love to have heard the tone in which he spoke to him that lie. It's brilliant. It's utterly brilliant, this scene, when you stop to think about it. When you stop to think about what the stakes probably were for Micaiah. It's absolutely brilliant, and that's probably why it's one of my favorite passages regarding the prophets in the Old Testament. Now, the last one I'm going to do, and again, this is probably just the last, it's not frequent that I make multiple episodes and briefs, because first off, they're supposed to be briefs. They're supposed to essentially be separate topical things, but you can't really address the prophets and do them any justice in an hour, even an hour and a half. It's just not going to happen. Why? Why? I would say for one reason, these prophets, whomever they were, and there seemed to be a good number of them, They were extremely diverse as individuals. We can see that, I mean, if we pay attention to the text, just in the books that individual prophets wrote. Even though they repeat very much the same messages, we can see they are very different people. And then when they're described to us, like we get in 1st and 2nd Kings between Elijah and Elisha, these were two people who were quite different, Elijah and Elisha. In look, in personality. Prophets were often very different. Often very different. Very different things happened to them. They were called to do very different things. Sometimes there's a guy, he's spoken of as a prophet, and he's got like one line. In the whole of the Old Testament, it's like one line, one thing he does, one object lesson, a thing he's told to do, and he does. So they're very diverse. And unfortunately, since so many words for agendas have been changed, there can be a number of items about what they're doing, their calling, what's going on, that can be a little unclear. Like, for instance, in this passage I'm about to read, it says that he took salt and he did a certain thing and all that, and I actually, the text is saying that he uses salt to heal this water of the city, and I argue against salt, the word translated salt, malak, being salt. It's not a hard K like Melech the king, MLK. We're talking about lach, from the root lach, LH, or lech, melech. I argue it's not salt, because you can say it with a CH or with a harder CH sound. I'm not 100% which is right. So, okay, here we go. Set the scene. This is literally right after Elijah, what am I supposed to say? Ascends in a fiery chariot? But I don't know if it was a fiery chariot. But he's gone. He's gone. Gone. He didn't die. He's one of the few people who we can positively say didn't die. We don't see him die. He literally is taken, didn't die. Elisha sees it. Now, Elisha is very upset. He's upset the whole day. He's upset the whole journey. Him and Elijah, they journey from like Bethel to another place, and then they end up at this Yirchu or Jericho, and they go across it alone. It's just them. He sees Elijah taken, however it was he was taken, in whatever. He comes back. Now, the whole time, of course, Elisha is being told by other prophets, which I'm sure was not a good time for him. He's being told by all manner of other prophets, hey, because they knew, they were told, your master's leaving. And he's like, yeah, I know. He's not pleased at all. And they keep telling him, like everywhere he goes, your master's, you know he's leaving. Yeah, I get it. Thank you. And although Elijah did promise him, if you see me go, you'll be imparted twice the anointing I had. Some pretty awesome things that Elisha ends up in the middle of after all this and doing. But he's still not very happy about it. So he goes back to, we'll just use the word Jericho. And they see him. They come back and they say, the sons of the prophets, the spirit of Elijah doth rest on Elisha. I get those two. And they came to meet him and bowed themselves to the ground before him, because Elijah was a great man among them. And they said unto him, Behold now, there be with thy servants 50 strong men. Let them go, we pray thee, and seek thy master, lest peradventure the Spirit of Yahweh is taken him up and cast him on a mountain or into some valley. Now, of course, Elisha watched him go, and Elisha knew he was gone. He wasn't taken somewhere and set down. And he was probably forlorn. Twice the anointing, twice the power or not, he was probably forlorn. And the reason, like I said, Elijah by this time would have been one of the most renowned men around, not just in Israel, around, anywhere. And Elijah chose Elisha to essentially be his successor, be his valet, until he left. And he spent some time with this man who he saw as a great man, at least a man he saw as a very anointed man who stuck to his guns and did some amazing things. In the last episode, I went over the whole incident at Carmel with all of those prophets of both Baal or Baal, and as they translate it, the groves. He's forlorn. He knows he didn't get set down somewhere. He's gone. So he says, don't send him. Be a waste of time. Don't send him. And it says, and when they urged him until he was ashamed. I wonder why they urged him. Maybe because they were so taken in love with Elijah. Because it couldn't have been long before that the whole Carmel thing happened. I think a lot of people didn't want to really think he was gone. I think Elisha didn't really want to think that he now, and he probably didn't think a lot of himself, really. Because it doesn't seem like Elisha really does think a lot of himself, really. And neither did Elijah, really. They didn't. And that seems to be pretty characteristic of most of these prophets. They don't think they're somebody great. Now Elisha's in a position, he's the successor of what may be the greatest prophet that Israel or anywhere has seen. And maybe he was beside himself too. So it says they urged him until he was ashamed, or maybe just until he finally relented. Like, they're not listening to me. Obviously, they're not really accepting me as the successor of Elijah either. And maybe they got their reasons. And so he said, send. And they sent therefore 50 men, and they sought 3 days and did not find him. Now, even if all of this is going on in and around the tiny land of Palestine and Transjordan, and even if they sent out 50 men, those 50 men would not have even come close to have had the chance or opportunity to really try to search out all the possible places where they thought he might be. That's just weird. That's just super weird. Maybe if it was 50 men and they were in a much, much bigger place, but they had certain technologies to search for somebody that we have today, but we just don't think they had then. Maybe they could have figured they could have done a far more comprehensive search, and they were pretty satisfied. Maybe they couldn't search everything, but they got all of the main places where they figured he might be, and after a few days they thought, yeah, he's definitely gone. So it says, and then when they came unto him, for he tarried at Jericho, he said unto them, did I not say to you, don't go? What are you looking at me for? I told you. And the men of the city said to Elisha, behold, I pray thee, the situation of this city is pleasant, as my Lord. Get it? Now that they know Elijah's really gone, and Elisha must really be his successor. My Lord, the situation of this city's pleasant, as my Lord sees, but the water's not so great, and the ground is barren. Now, are those words correct? The water is not? The ground is barren? If you wanted, I could rabbit trail into an in-depth word study, but let's just say that's kind of sort of the case. And I think why they're telling him that, maybe, they're trying to get him to stick around. Or once they realized that Elijah was gone and Elisha was his successor, and they called him my Lord, they thought of the first big problem they had. They thought of the first big problem they had. We got a situation here, the water's not so great. And the ground's not so great because the water's not so great. Now, this could have been temporary, and sometimes, depending, because we don't know what kind of water they're talking about. Are they talking about the city water? We don't know. We don't know if they're talking about the natural water coming in, the city water, or what. So, we'll suspend, not disbelief, but questions. We'll go on, and it says, and he said, bring me a new cruse, and put salt therein. That's the word, melech, or melech, is not salt, but okay. And they brought it to him, and he went forth unto the spring of the waters, and he cast the melech, or salt in, and he said, thus says Yahweh, I've healed these waters. There shall not be from thence any more death or barren. And they added land. And they added land in there, which I don't like, because they're trying to always give us the idea that the place was not so great, that the place was, that the place was Palestine. No offense. So the waters were healed unto this day, according to the saying of Elisha, which he spake. There you go, Elijah's successor. They figured it out, and okay, and he goes and he fixes a big problem for them, supernaturally. Because not every interaction, and this is kind of part of it, not every interaction of the prophets was negative. There's plenty that are, plenty. That one wasn't. They showed him respect. They didn't mean to show him the disrespect in the way they were talking to him, how they treated him before necessarily. But this city and these people did show him the due respect of the successor of Elijah that he deserved, I think. And then we have the last few verses just to cap it all off. Now these last few verses, I warn you, they are bizarre. And if you don't like what they seem to be saying, then I suggest you knuckle down and start trying to figure out exactly what the source language said before it was changed. I will tell you, I've checked all of the key terms in these verses, and I'm not suggesting all of them are absolutely accurate or not accurate. I am saying that all of them remain consistent with all of the other occurrences of these key terms. That's all I'm saying. So starting in verse 23, it says, he went up from there towards Bethel. And as he was going up, by the way, there came forth little children out of the city. Now, the one part is the word that's translated as little. That's the one possibility that it's not little as far as like the little teeny kids, because it's Nora, which is typically used for like a youth, like teenagers, and least can be used, the word that's translated little. Oftentimes, insignificant is better for it. Because there are passages where it says, it's speaking of like grown men. Okay? And it uses the same word. From great men to insignificant men. Like, maybe the teen rabble, or not even teen, young people. Nora, it's not just teens. Young people, these like young people, don't really got a job, hanging out, troublemakers. And given the state that the rest of the kingdom of Israel was in, wouldn't be surprised if there was a lot of them loitering around. So anyways, came forth the more insignificant young people out of the city, the rabble, and they mocked him. And they said unto him, go up, bald head, go up, bald head. Now, they're just saying ole, and they're using the word that's oftentimes translated as bald head, which is, I'm going to double check here. Go up, bald head. It is Quirach, Q-R-H. Quirach. Now, a lot of times it is translated as bald or baldness, but sometimes it's actually translated as ice, strangely enough. Either which way, you get the sense that they are mocking him. Now, the word translated as mocked is typically translated as mock, deride. And so 24 says, and he turned back and he looked at them and he cursed them in the name of Yahweh. And there came forth 2 she-bears. It wouldn't be she-bears, it's dabim. Okay, the word dab is frequently translated as bear, but if it says dabim, shani dabim, or sometimes shati dabim, one more time, because yeah, I did look at this, but I can't remember all the words I looked at. Shani, no, that's in 42. Shatim. Funny thing, shatim. Appointed. I'm serious. There's a problem when both shen and shet are translated the same thing as two. Unfortunately, it's falling under shin. But real quick, because it matters. Words matter. Let me see if I've got it in here. Under all the ways shet is translated. So for some insight, since they're using shatim, not shanim, shatim can frequently be translated as drink. Now, I've looked this up extensively in the past, and one of the possible modern cognates, I believe, is sate. To satisfy or fill. So, without doing a big contextual study, it can see that basically, as though a number of these Dabim came forth and filled the group, the place, wherever they were. Not two, not she-bears, but whatever this deb is. Dib? Deb? I mean, it's one of the animals that David said that he had to fight a sheep away from. So I think we get a very different picture, and we would have to when we see, it says, from the Oir, maybe the woods, countryside, whatever. And it says, and it tore to bakone, more like clave than tore. Ma'em, from them, are boim 40 and shani 2 yiladim, children. And again, because they're called yiladim, that doesn't mean they were little teeny kids. That is a general term for children, offspring. That's rough, right? That's rough. That's a verse someone will use when they're trying to point out how horrible and violent Yahweh is. So, whatever you think, and I hope whatever you think is based on some looking into it, might have really transpired here. Doesn't seem nice. Whatever we see going on, doesn't seem nice. Seems pretty rough. Whatever happened. Maybe the language is actually really telling us that whatever these were, and they do seem to be animals, these Dabim, didn't kill them. It doesn't use any words that are ever used anywhere else as kill, first off. Be straight about that. And because it's using a word that's oftentimes the same root is found in things like a valley, clave, separate, or dispersed, chased off, maybe scared the living shit out of them. Because I don't see any of the words used for kill. Maybe whoever filled that in wanted us to think that Yahweh was a bloodthirsty sadist. Which, even if that happened, even if it happened just like the translators put in there, he doesn't have a right to punish anyone for shit-talking his prophet? If so. And you see, oftentimes I'm going to leave those if-sos because, for one thing, I'm honest. I'm trying to make a point, But I want to be perfectly frank and open and admit all potential factors to you. But you know, even if we're talking about some kind of a dangerous animal, or not even an animal, maybe just dangerous, whatever, scared the shit out of them, maybe injured some, chased them off. That's still not very nice. Whatever happened. I think we could relatively agree on that. Whatever happened probably wasn't very nice. And there are so many more stories of the prophets either having to do things that put them in such serious jeopardy, or sometimes doing things that either put others in serious jeopardy for good reason. Like, for instance, we saw with Micaiah telling the king, oh yeah, go up and attack Ramoth Gilead. You're gonna do great. You're gonna do great. The prophets aren't here. They weren't there, unfortunately. I can't say here, because I don't know that I've heard or seen of one, real one, of Yahweh in my lifetime. In what history we can trust. That sucks. That sucks. That sucks. Sucks. It sucks. So, let me just say they weren't there to be nice. They weren't there to make people who were selfish, who were lawless, who were reckless, feel good. They weren't there to be a cushion. They weren't there as a salve or a balm. They were there to do what Yahweh told them to do, to say what Yahweh told them to say, and the consequences were the consequences. And a lot of them endured pretty rough consequences. They did what they were told. From the mouth of the only one that mattered. The people not liking them because they didn't make the people feel good didn't matter. It didn't matter. It didn't even matter. I don't see any of them actually stopping and thinking about it for a minute, thinking, yeah, how is this going to... Oh boy, how is this going to affect my social credit score? Are a few people going to leave my Patreon? Are a lot? They didn't stop to think about that. They did what they knew was best to do. And admittedly, and I'm going to draw a parallel to me. I'm not calling myself a prophet, but I'm drawing a parallel here. In the sense that I wish I at least had the grasp of knowing for sure that I understood all of these things, all of the terms, the language, the grammar, so I absolutely knew. But anyone who wants to take that and use that against me, like, well, he doesn't really even know what he's talking about. Like you do? Like you know more? What do you know? What do you know? Tell me what you know. Tell me the kind of work that you've done. Tell me what you've discovered about the language of the Bible. Tell me how trustworthy it is. Tell me how untrustworthy it is, and tell me why it's not trustworthy. Tell me what parts of it might be more trustworthy and why. So before you think to use my honesty against me because you don't like what I'm saying, ask yourself, do you know more? Have you done more work? And can you articulate that? Because I haven't found someone who can. So please, enlighten me if you have any light. I would appreciate that. Just trying to give it to you straight, as much as I can. And that's straight. You heard that expression? I'm not here to make friends. That could have been the prophet's bumper sticker. I'm not here to make friends. And I'm sure every last one of them liked having friends. I'm sure every last one of them liked eating, liked comfort and warmth. I'm sure every one of them appreciated good company of a woman, nice things. I'm sure they appreciated all of those basic things that a lot of people take for granted. Probably many of the people, most of the people in their own day took for granted. I'm sure they appreciated those things. But like the bumper sticker says, they weren't there to make friends. They were there to do the best they could with what information they were given. And oftentimes, even today, you don't have to understand the Bible in the way I do, or in the way that someone who might be trustworthy out there does. And if you know of them, let me know. Please do a little work, do a little research into them before you throw them my way. I'd appreciate it. I don't got tons of time. Most of the time that I have, I'm trying to do valuable work. But anyone can take any information that they have that seems to be good information. They've tried to vet it. They've done what they can to grab on to something good, pure, honorable, noble. They've done all they can. They've done all they can. And when they've done that, they hang on to it hard. They don't worry about, am I going to lose friends because I have to hang on to this? Because I know it's right. I know it's right. And other people aren't really going to like it if I hang on and I don't budge. So am I going to take the path of least resistance? Because I like when people like me. I like the likes on the Facebook. I like when people will talk to me in public. I like when I can go to work and not everybody ignores me. But to get those likes, you gotta not hang on to that even little bit of truth that you've worked so hard to attain. And I hope everybody's got at least some little bit of truth that they've worked hard to attain. Because if you're one of those person who do hang on to that, even that little bit of truth. Because in today's day and age, with lies all around us, that tiny little bit of truth is a treasure. It's a treasure. And you should be willing to let everybody around you think you're an asshole for hanging tight onto that. that's the sort of an attitude a prophet would have to have. The prophets who didn't, one of them in particular, and there were more, one of them in particular we looked at in the first of these three. It's not an easy or safe thing to go after what's good or what's right and what's true. But most of you know that it is a good thing. It's the best thing. No matter if you've justified going after other things or compartmentalizing those things or not. A lot of you know it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And you're not always going to be talked about very well if you do. And you're oftentimes going to have to be very blunt and coarse if that's you and you're hanging on to even that little tiny bit of purity. So as I wrap this up one more time, please do visit the Amazon page, my book. Please pick one up. And, if you don't want to spend the $40 on the book, and you want to just send me a donation, now, one thing I didn't include, I can also send you the PDF of the book if you want to. Send me a $25 donation to either my PayPal or Venmo. Let me know your email address. But hey, what's better than actually having a real book in your hands? The real thing. Paper. Paper bound together. A real record as opposed to in the electronosphere. They're both good though. I use PDFs all the time for searches and stuff. So I like to have both. If it's a good book, I like to have both. And I have many books. Both the hard copy and the PDF. Or if you're into Kindle, there you go. So, other than that, also, please consider becoming a patron. Because I could use it. Because I honestly think, in an objective way, that we need a voice like mine out there, and it needs to be heard by more people. Because if I'm gone, who is there? Like, really? I mean, seriously. Who is there that does this? This kind of thing. This kind of stuff. Because I don't know. If there was somebody like even remotely close, I'd be listening to him. I'd be like friends with him, I think. Probably. If we were both grabbed onto those little nuggets of the truth, grabbed on tight, and we weren't flinching, I'd probably be like friends with him. So, I don't think there's anyone else. That's sad. Hopefully it won't continue that way. So, until next time. Right. Till next time.